and welcome to Thursday Night Live with Fisher Brackman. Hello. Hello, how are you doing? It's the weekend in Doha. How was your week? Let's allow a few moments for other people to join. Hello, welcome. Tonight's topic, hi Annie. Tonight's topic is barrenness in church. It's about fame, it's about faith, shame, healing, and true fruitfulness. Yes, you made it. You set alarm. So basically, the reason for this topic is that it appears that women are struggling a lot in church. They don't find the love and the support because of the judgments that they encounter due to cultural reasons or religious reasons. So I just want to talk through it, that infertility exists in church, just like it exists in every society. It exists in every religion. Infertility can be primary or secondary, which means primary is that you've never been able to conceive. Secondary is that you've conceived before you have a child, but you can't conceive another child. Both of them can be very heartbreaking. Barrenness is not evidence of sin. It's not evidence of weak faith or divine punishment. It's none of that. I don't know how the modern church got these ideas, but we're going to look at cultural context and try to understand where it may be coming from. So, as some of you know, in the last year, I've been reading the Bible, the entire Bible chronologically. So I attempted to read the entire Bible in a year. I did this same exercise in 2015. So almost 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago, I did it in 2015. I'd had 3 miscarriages. I was struggling a lot, and I was reading the Bible, digging up everyone who has had infertility, what they did, how they did it, praying, trying to walk in their shoes. But this year, I have looked at the Bible differently this time as a woman who has overcome infertility, as a traveler. And as some of you know, in the last year, I went to the Holy Land. Like, I walked through just to put myself there, archaeologically, historically, the stories, just kind of experience it. So in the last year, I went to Syria, I went to Jordan, I went to Jerusalem, Bethlehem, Jericho, and I took some of you along for that trip. So basically, just understanding cultural context to some of the stories we've been hearing all our lives. Not like the stories will change, but your understanding of the stories will change. So it's not, who is calling me? No. So barrenness is not about God's approval. Yes, you do. It's not about spiritual maturity. It's not about womanhood or worth. It's just something that happens, and for different reasons. And we're going to look at stories in the Bible, those who have suffered through infertility, just to see different spectrums of human vulnerability. And why is it always women who bear the brunt of it? I think the cultural concept of it has left it in a way that women are always the ones who suffer where there is infertility. So there are some Bible verses that they have also used in churches to kind of push people, like, those who know their God. I'll bless their water, bless their food, take sickness away from their body. None shall be barren and none shall miscarry. So basically, they use it to hold people who don't have children as if they did something wrong. Some people cite the story of the fig tree, which Jesus cursed when it had no fruit, even though it wasn't about that. And also the creation mandate, where we are told to go and multiply and fill the face of the earth, which was a collective mandate. But somehow we're going to look at stories of women, and then I'm going to tell personal stories about my life walking through infertility in church, the things that I noticed and the things that I felt. And again, I must notice that I am not calling anybody out. I am not calling out any churches. People, yeah, I might mention, okay, this was in Canada and this was in Dubai or something like that, but it's not to say that I have a grudge, and it's not to say that you should go and start investigating and asking who did what when. And don't ask me, I won't tell you, because that's not what we're here for. But it's just to help people who have gone through this situation. I don't know, some guy from India keeps calling my, and it's very distracting. But I'll try to ignore it. I hope he stops calling because it's not nice. So we're going to start looking at the stories, mostly chronologically. So the first story, Billy boy, can I ask you, please stop calling me? Stop calling me. You're distracting me. Stop calling me. So the first story is Sarah, wife of Abraham, because normally also they gather women, you want to pray for them, and, to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Apart from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob being father, son, and grandson, they also had wives that dealt with infertility. And the Bible starts with a strong infertility theme. So I don't know how a lot of people miss the memo and they're bullying women with infertility. So let's look at what happened with Sarah. Sarah was married to Abraham for an unspecified amount of time. We don't know. But what we do know that God made them a promise. And from the promise, they were already dealing with infertility before the promise. But from the promise, it took 25 years for her to have her own child. And in that period, I think 10 years into the promise, after Abraham had even handed her off to the Pharaoh when they went to Egypt during the famine, she then volunteered her maid to have a child for Abraham. And that's how Ishmael was born. And then 14 to 15 years later, Isaac was born. So this woman suffered depression, questioned her self-worth. She had the pressure of a promise that her husband would be the husband of nations, and they had no children, and she was in old age. She was 90 when Isaac was born. But it's very easy that biologically you start questioning things, you start having doubts, and you have all this pressure because there's no other child. This lineage was just on you. So this was the cultural context in which Sarah found herself. And she did so sometimes we look at these stories, we equate them in modern times. Now, we don't have female slaves, but there are different ways. There's fertility treatment, there's surrogacy, there's adoption. There are other ways how these things has pan out now, but it's the same story, right? And then Rebecca and Isaac. So Rebecca was, according to Bible record, was barren for 20 years. But in Rebecca's scenario, it looks like either they really loved each other or they just didn't really feel as much pressure as Sarah felt. And then what I must mention is that when Sarah died, Abraham remarried and had 6 more sons. And Ishmael, the first son, also had 12 sons. So there were already a lot of children in the family by the time Rebecca was dealing with infertility. So she didn't have the pressure that this is the end of the line, right? I think maybe that might have been why their own stories didn't get so inflamed. So when women go through infertility, they're going through a lot of pressure. And I don't think they should be having a lot from their church, their place of worship, where they should be getting support, because life moves on if you do and kill yourself. So I'm just putting it out there. Everything should be with moderation and with caution, because some, even you do IVF, it fails. You do again, it fails. Your clinic will now tell you to take 3 months rest. You change clinic and start. You're not letting your body rest. You're going from prayer to fasting to IVF. It takes a toll. And if you die, life will go on. And I can say this with as much sensitivity as I can, because I have seen it happen. Sarah brought the maid. That child was born. She sent that child away. She fought to protect the heritage of Isaac. She died. He remarried, had 6 more sons. And the most shocking part, which is usually not mentioned in church a lot, is that Ishmael that was sent away was at the funeral of Abraham. If you look towards the end of Genesis, when Abraham died, it was Isaac and Ishmael that buried him. Let that sink in. Think about it. It might give you some perspective why you should love yourself and apply self-care even in infertility. Then the third person, Rachel, wife of Jacob. So Rachel became the second wife of Jacob, but was supposed to be the first wife. Jacob fell in love with Rachel. We know the story. And asked for Rachel's hand, for which Rachel's father asked him to work 7 years to marry Rachel. So he worked 7 years, eyeing Rachel lovingly the whole while. And at the point where he was supposed to go into Rachel for the wedding, they tricked him and gave him Leah, the elder sister of Rachel, and then promised him that just complete your week with Leah, then you can have Rachel, but you will now work 7 more years for her bride price, which he agreed to. So he completed his week with Leah and he married Rachel. So their weddings was like a week apart, but the Bible recorded that Leah wasn't barren, Rachel was. So we cannot accurately specify the duration of her barrenness, but we know that 11 children were born while she was trying to have one. So first of all, Leah had 4 sons. At this point, Rachel brought her maid. Rachel's maid had 2 sons. Then Leah looked at it. She's not having more. Rachel now has 2 by a maid. So Leah, that had 4 sons, also brought her maid. The maid had 2 sons. And then at some point, Leah traded mandrakes of her son with Rachel and then went into Jacob and had 2 more sons and then a daughter. So 11 children. So even if they are burning them 1 year after the other, that will be at least 11 years. But it's possible that it could have been more years in between her waiting. It can't be easy because now you're in direct rivalry with your own sister. And she's fruitful and you're not, and you just want to hold your own child. Eventually, in Rebecca's own case, after 20 years, she had twins, Esau and Jacob. So it's not automatic that long wait has to end up with twins, which some people have mistakenly started quoting in the Bible, double for your trouble, this. It does not always follow. So you need to manage your expectations and also align your prayers with what you want. So Rachel went ahead and had Joseph and then died having Benjamin. So that's how her own story pans out. So different people, different reactions to infertility. And we're just going to look at a few more before I tell you how I navigated being in church and dealing with infertility and what we can learn from it. 4th woman on my list, Hannah. Hannah is the wife of Elkanah, and there was a second wife in the family who already had children. And she was barren. She prayed earnestly and she promised God that she would dedicate her child to God. And then she had Samuel, who was already dedicated to service and worked with Eli, a prophet. So he was a prophet who anointed David eventually. So that is that angle. And I think this is where they have now started trying to make every woman turn into a prayer warrior if they don't have children. Let me tell you, some will pray. Some won't pray as hard because there are people who don't pray at all, who have children. So just follow me, because don't perform. I want you to understand that you don't get to a stage where you start performing religion, performing holiness, just performing for your church people, because God is a spirit and those who worship him must worship him in spirit and truth. So you have to mean your worship. You have to understand it. Your faith is not a show. So you can't go and use Hannah's playbook, and you can't go and be promising a child to the service of God what you don't plan to follow through, because you have to guide that child in how to serve God. Fifth woman, Manoah's wife. She wasn't specifically named. So her name was never given to us, but she was the mother of Samson, the very strong man that was not supposed to cut his hair. In their own situation, what I got is that a couple, yes, they had infertility. There were no other factors that we can see, like there was no other wife, and it seemed like they loved each other. And the man was spiritually aware because the angel had appeared to Manoah's wife and announced to her that she would have a son. She should avoid alcohol. She should avoid this. He will be dedicated a Nazarite from birth, from the womb. And he will never cut his hair. So the instructions were given to her, and she ran and told her husband. And what the man did next impressed me. He prayed and asked God for the man to return and give him the instructions too, so that he can properly care for this child. This is partnership. This is not just, so I saw a different side of it, not where woman is praying alone. This man prayed, and the angel came back, and they even tried to beg him, let them cook goat for him. He said no, that he should set the goat on fire as a burnt offering. And that's how Samson came about. And it was a divine whatever, because they're supposed to save the people, and because they were being oppressed by the Philistines. And then the sixth woman on my list, Elizabeth, mother of John the Baptist. She was in old age. Also, there was no record of another wife in the picture. The husband was a priest. So far, we're talking about very devout men who had a good relationship with God, people who would have been considered in that era as righteous. Nobody so far has been saying, she threw something, she stole something, God decided to smite. No. Every infertility that has been listed so far was factual, that you're of age, you're having intercourse, you're married, and there is no child. Not as a result of or out of spite, or that God's smart. So where did Christians get the idea that women in your church who don't have children is by reproach? Where is it? I want to know. That's why I'm telling all this story, so that we can start to approach our fellow Christians with some love, some sensitivity, some empathy. So Elizabeth's story, I will come back to it, but there were no other wives. They were old. And it suggests, like Bible historians suggest, that the attempt to delay it may have been prophetic, because John the Baptist had to come before Christ, but he couldn't come 50 years before. He was supposed to, they came a few months apart. When it was announced to Mary that she was going to have Jesus, it was also told to her that Elizabeth was pregnant, and then she ran to Elizabeth, and Elizabeth confirmed it. So you see, it could have been, she could have had that child 50 years earlier, but that was not the design. So I've talked about the people that the Bible clearly said infertility. There are a few other women in the Bible who were married, who either didn't have children in one marriage, then had children in another marriage, or never had children. So let's just look at their situation. They were not called barren specifically. Why? One, and just to tell you that it's not everybody you see who does not have children is dealing with infertility. Some might be by choice. Some might be by other factors that you cannot see. So let's look at a few people. Prophetess Anna, the person who bore witness to the arrival of Jesus Christ. Prophetess Anna was widowed after 7 years of marriage. 7 years is long enough to have at least one child. So we would assume that, I don't know, but she didn't have any child in the 7 years, and she never remarried, and she devoted the rest of her life to temple worship. So it was a story out there. Nobody was rebuking her or anything, but nobody called her barren, but she didn't have children. Then this one is interesting. Michal, the first wife of King David, daughter of King Saul. So this marriage was a trap in itself. So when David, before he became a king, was best friends with Jonathan and King Saul. They had beef. You remember he killed Goliath, aroused the jealousy of King Saul. But at some point, King Saul's daughter, Michal, was in love with David, and it was reported to King Saul. So he sent people to kind of entice David into becoming his son-in-law. David said he was too poor to be a king's son-in-law, this, that. Somehow the king said, oh no, for the bride price, you can give me the foreskin of 100 Philistines and it will be okay. So David went out with his men and massacred some Philistines and delivered 100 foreskins and married Michal. And the tension, but King Saul had thought that this would kill David, but it didn't. So the tension had been very bad for a while, up to the extent that David became a fugitive. And at the point David became a fugitive, Saul took his wife, Michal, and offered him to another man as wife, a man called Patil. So, and then eventually, King Saul was killed at war, and David returned and was crowned king. And then when Abner came to speak to him, he said, you may not speak to me. The only way, hey, Jeanette, hey, Damsey, the only way you can see my face is to return my wife, Michal. So they went and took Michal, who was living for a few years with that new husband. As they were dragging her back to King David's house, that new husband was following them, crying. The Bible did not explicitly say whether that marriage was consummated or whether they were in love or what happened in that marriage. But it recorded that that new husband, who was not even supposed to be with her, was crying and following the entourage, escorting her back to King David's house. So it appeared it was a political statement. King David needed to cement his authority. You can't have a wife he paid bride price for living with another man. So he had to take that woman back, not out of affection. It was a symbol. So she fell from being a beloved wife into a political symbol. So it is possible that there was death of intimacy and everything. So even before King David was now dancing, before the ark of God, dancing like crazy, the part that they said she despised him and they had a fight. And then the Bible now recorded that she died childless. So even before that, and even if that didn't happen, there is a possibility that King David was never going to touch her again. He had eight more wives. And no, he had 8 official wives and some wives that were unnamed and concubines that were unnamed. So, some pastors leave the backstory, which is a few chapters earlier, and just tell you how David was dancing and his wife looked at him with disgust, and God now rebuked her and she didn't have any children. But that's not what the Bible actually says. So I had to go and look at the cultural, the history. And this was a man that was a rival with your father, and your father has been killed and he's now king in place of your father. So a lot of things, but the argument they had that day was not nice. He said he was dancing to his God. His wife was mocking him and said, yes, it's the same God that dethroned your father and made me king. So the way they were talking to each other is not a way a loving couple would. So it's not unlikely that she died childless because her husband, the king, wouldn't touch her and nobody else would. So I just want to put it there. So that is not always when there's no child. It's a fertility issue. It could also be an emotional issue. And then there was Ruth. Ruth was married to a man called Malon in Moab, the daughter-in-law of Naomi. Her husband died. Her brother-in-law died. I think the 2 wives were there, and the one went back home. She chose to stay on with her mother-in-law. But she was married for 10 years. There was no child. And biblical history suggests that the men in that family were sickly and that there was a lot of famine. So there could have been other factors for which she did not conceive in that 10 years because she went ahead to marry Boaz, and she had Jesse. So we just, is it Obed and then, no, Obed, Jesse, then David. So these things happen that there could be a lot more going on. This should caution you when you go to approach people who do not have children. First of all, as what? Because if you're friends, they will come to you. If you're a spiritual leader, they will come to you. If you're a professional in the field, they will come to you. So first of all, check with yourself. What am I approaching this woman who has no child as? And what can I contribute to her? Moral support or gossip? You need to think about it. Check yourself, because sometimes you want gist so that you can tell someone else. Maybe two of you have discussed the person, and one of you is now bold enough to go and check with her what's going on so that you can tell others. It's not important. Please. So, and then another woman, Bathsheba, who eventually became the wife of David as well, she was married to a military man, Uriah, who David eventually killed at war. I don't know, it's unspecified how long they were married, but she had no children by him. But he was a very devout soldier. Even when they sent him home, he would not touch her because other soldiers were at war. So if this is how he was normally, it would suggest that in the course of their marriage, it was just never appropriate timing to have a child. But she eventually conceived with King David. So absence of children is not always infertility. Delay is not always a defect. Silence is not always equating to shame. Sometimes it can be a design, it can be choice, and we need to be careful. So some wombs are hidden for a season, protected from premature storylines. For example, John the Baptist. John the Baptist could not come 50 years earlier. He needed to come and bear witness that the Christ was come. He needed to confirm, this is the Christ I speak about. He didn't need to come a generation before, die. Don't say, when Christ comes, let's say, is this the one, John? No, he needed to be there to bear witness. So this is a much older auntie or cousin of Mary. And she needed to be the one to know that Mary was pregnant, because at the time, they would have stoned her. At that period in time, it needed to be a safe person that would know she's pregnant without marriage. And then some wombs are reserved for specific redemptive moments, like Samson, like some of the stories there, is a specific redemptive moment. So the delay, so everybody is on a different journey, and be more spiritual in your life. If I can tell you something, is that you get to a point that you can understand, you can hear and understand what the purpose for your life is. It will really make all the difference. And then honorable mention, the woman with the issue of blood. The Bible tells us specifically that for 12 years, she had issue of blood. So even if she was married, or if she was still married in this period, she was ceremonially unclean. So no self-respecting Jew would touch her in that period. So it would be, in fact, it would be okay to assume that she had no children. Maybe after she was healed, it happened. But in that 12 years with the issue of blood, she would have been barren. To some people who didn't even know she had an issue of blood. So now I'm going to get into some stories about judgments, about how prayer requests turn into gossip, pity disguised as spirituality. When I got married, I was still living in Canada. I was living in Calgary. I was part of a church, but from time to time, I went to different churches, right? I got married in 2013. And I remember that year, a visiting pastor had come to our church. And he seemed, then, I was raised Catholic. And then I dabbled into different churches from time to time. And I finally settled in this church. So I was not someone that had been raised to know pastors. Like, we knew some gospel sing in Catholic church now. We sing hymn and we know some songs. So we're not like, I know Don Juan and a few people, but we're not those people who knew all these gospel singers and all these big pastors and all. No, we didn't know, so there was so much buzz and excitement about this particular pastor. And then I was just newly married. And because I knew I had PCOS and I knew that we might struggle with fertility, when he said all the women who were seeking the fruit of the womb to come out, I came out with some other women. So, well, even people that were not part of our church came to our church because that man was in town. And then people were murmuring. And, they even reannounced that, no, they didn't say those standing in the gap for someone. They said those seeking. Because at that point, some people didn't even know I was married because I didn't do the whole marriage counseling program and all of that. So I stood there. And then when I think he spoke to some of us individually. When he got to my side, he asked a few questions. And then he now said to me that if he's a servant of the living God, by this time, the next year, I would have a son. That was maybe October 2013 or something. And you know how these things happen. You believe it, you accept it with all your heart. Then the next year rolls around. Not only do you not have a son, you don't have any child at all. It can really affect you. But what that period did is that it announced to people that I don't even know, who are not even my friends, that there's a problem, because I was very newly married. I married September 2013. So if October, I'm already standing out. But because I'd had PCOS for almost 10 years before, but they didn't know that. So if I'm already coming out for prayers, it seemed like I had a problem, right? So I had announced unconsciously to some people that I had a problem. And there was a particular woman who had the gift of prophecy. These people, I call them thus says the Lord people, that during prayers, they will shout in a loud voice, they will have prophecies, ushers will run and put microphone in their mouth, and then they will say something, and then the prophecy is for somebody, whatever. So this particular woman then started targeting me. She came to me and told me I was pregnant a few months into this whole thing. I told her that I was sure I wasn't, because my husband didn't live in Canada at the time. He used to come and go. So I said I was sure I wasn't pregnant. She insisted that I should go and buy baby clothes. And then she kept each Sunday, she would come and prompt again. Did I do it? Do I not have faith? At some point, it got bothersome. So I told a friend who told me that I should not mind that she had done it to her, and she had done it to another lady. So you know how she had the gift of prophecy, it appeared, because some of her prophecies had come to pass. But over time, she had started to just maybe go off on her own. I don't know, but it was very annoying and very deeply disturbing. And then there was another incident that I heard a rumor also that sometimes a visiting pastor is coming and the home pastor in some churches will tell them some church members' issues, so that because the visiting pastor is not supposed to know you, if he tells you, goes on stage and mentions your story, it makes you feel like you have been visited. You're jumping in excitement and all that. It's a type of manipulation. So I'm going to ask you to protect yourself from such manipulation, right? It happens in some places. And then there was another visiting pastor that a friend had now helped me go so that he would pray for me too. I was really looking for prayers. Now I know better that you can pray for yourself and you can find trusted spaces to pray. And then he asked me to kneel down, and then he asked the problem, and I said I was trying to have a baby. This man now he laughed. He was like, ho, 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 all this, ha, 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 all you of little faith. And then he gave me a slap for being of little faith. Like, I'm on my knees, you're supposed to pray for me. And then you slap me because I'm vulnerable. But he went ahead to pray. But at that point, my spirit was down. I was really upset because of all the things you would expect when you kneel down for prayers, it's not a slap for being of little faith. So and then I don't even want to get into the ones that a pastor will tell you to come to his house, let him pray for you in his house, or he's visiting you, now come to his hotel room for prayers. Please, please, and please, any prayer that they cannot pray for you in the midst of others, please stop it. Any prayer that requires be careful, please stop it, because there are fake pastors in different places that they give, some people give false hope. There's spiritual exploitation. All this, sow a seed and conceive. God does not sell children, and God does not sell children, and God does not want you to pay for miracles, and he does not embarrass his children. Please. Blaming women when it doesn't happen and all these countdown prophecies, please be careful. Okay, and then there was another occasion. This was already, I'd had the 3 miscarriages and I was visiting Canada. This is after I'd left Canada, and a friend of mine had taken me to this church it was a different church that she just started visiting. It was run by a couple, I think, that come from America to Canada, but it was a new church. And she was preaching. The pastor knew I was coming because my friend had told them about me and a bit of my story. So I'm sitting there, she's preaching, the whole service is going, and then she now says she got a prompt that something, I can't remember how she cased it, but basically, if you wanted to partake in the whatever, you needed to pay $70. You needed to drop $70 right now. As I just rolled my eyes like, this path come again. And I just said, I don't have cash. Next thing, I saw people coming with POS all around for that $70. And people were paying. And people were really into it. So I wasn't really sure if it's something that happens often or if just that people really have faith here, right? But at some point, when this whole service was going on, she was calling people to the stage. People were going and falling. So I'm sitting there like, this can never be me. I'm not falling. What are they falling from? Then at some point, she was on the stage. She looks at me directly and tells me to come. So I'm walking towards her and she's telling me something about it will not happen again. This. And before I got to her, I don't know what happened. Like, next thing I know, I opened my eye and 2 ushers are carrying me off the stage. The point that I fell or what she said next, I don't know. And some people will interpret it that she was spirit-filled, it was this, I don't know. All I just know is that I was carried off the stage. But before this had happened, this was like March of 2016. This was after all the miscarriages, and this was after I'd gone to Germany, I'd done all my blood tests, and I was waiting to know the way forward. That was when this happened. But before this, in December, when I had my 3rd pregnancy, I was because I'd done the pre-genetic screening and I was almost certain that this is the one that would stay. I had a type of glow that I can't even explain. And then the bleeding started and I just lost my shine. And, I'm typically a floor member in church. I'm not an usher. I'm not in any of the big groups. So I'm someone that you can easily not see, but it was a much smaller, intimate church in Dubai that I was going to at the time. And a week after my miscarriage, the pastor called me and said, something has changed between this week and last week. What happened to you? Like, church had ended. I greeted him. I was on my way home. And he called me and said, something has changed between last week and this week. You were glowing last week. And this is a church where people see each other, where people love each other, where people care about each other. And I can't tell you how important that is. So I explained to him what had happened to me. And he, we prayed together and he said he would come with his wife to my house and they would pray, which they did. And we prayed and prayed and there was all this affliction will not arise a second time. So when this woman on that stage in that church in Calgary was now telling me it will not happen again, it was seeming prophetic. But sometimes a lot has happened to you. You're angry, you're on guard. So it's sometimes it's a few years later or a few moments later that you start to connect things. Is this what happened here? Is this what happened there? But, a lot was going on. And in this whole period, I talked to a friend who was also very religious and very Christian about IVF and failing and pain. And she told me that after her first son, her second son was born 6 years later. Do I think it was family planning in a Nigerian home? I said no. She said that they also struggled. And because they kept praying, it didn't even occur to them to go to hospital and seek medical help, because that is the way you're wired in the church, because this is a gift from God. Go and ask God and all that. So they eventually went to a gynecologist, and I think her system had gone out of sync after her first child, and they put her on Clomid, and she conceived. So she was telling me that, yes, you can have secondary infertility, you can pray about it, you can also get medical help, and that these things happen to more people that I know. And this was the first time that I was having such an open conversation about fertility with someone who is in church and deeply religious. And it did a lot for my mental health. And that is part of the reason that I have taken this up, to just be out there, to help somebody, to tell you that there is nothing new under the earth. There's no shege that you will see that has never been seen before. But you need to find a loving, safe space to navigate it. So basically, that's what I wanted to say in that segment. God does not sell daughters. Does not. And then there are some that you're so oppressed that you start feeling spiritually isolated. You get hurt, you start feeling isolation, and some people will leave the church. And here are some of the reasons why people leave church. Baby dedications every month. Mother's Day trauma. No safe place to grieve. And this is even one of my churches, the pastor had been married for many years. They were also childless at the time. And every week, in fact, that man's joy needs to be studied, because almost every month he would dedicate a few babies. He would dance more than the parents. He would sing. He would pray. The man had joy in spite of. And when they eventually had their child, the whole church was in big celebration. And I think that I learned so much from their journey, because not just that they were the ones who were praying for other people to have children, and they stayed without children. And that was really a big thing. So, and then there was a particular Mother's Day in my church, and that shared towels. Yes, in churches, whether you're a mother or not, if you're a wife, Mother's Day, you do Mother's Day together. So I'd been given a towel, and I think another woman didn't like the color of her towel. So this male usher, one man, came to me and said that, yes, somebody does not like their towel. She needs to collect my towel, that I'm not a mother, so that a mother wants that color. So he can give me this other color. I said, if you take this towel, I don't want any other towel. And he stood there for a while, and then he left. But I think he realized that he had done something wrong, because when I was leaving church, he was following me. He was apologizing and apologizing. You hurt, even at some point, I now tried to even tell another friend in church that this happened to me today. She said, I should not blame him now. That when did I become a woman? I thought I was born a female, and I thought that as an adult I'd become a woman. But apparently, if you don't have a child, you're not considered a woman to them. So these kind of things, some people start avoiding church. Some people, and they start to lose the community you've built within the church, and then you start feeling guilty for staying away. Some people just leave. Some people stop. And leaving church is sometimes a survival response, not rebellion, because you just can't cope with the way things are going, and then you leave. And then there's a lot going on, and we just need to be careful how we talk to people, what we say to people, how we break the hearts of other people, because we're, just going with the flow. Road back, healing, boundaries, safe faith. So I'm just going to tell you that sometimes, instead of leaving the faith completely, it's better to change to a smaller, more intimate church where the pastor is loving and kind and attentive, as opposed to a loud one. Just this might help you decompress, to find your faith again. where you can hope without pressure. I used to, the, some people, I've seen a few testimonies where a couple who are very religious, very Christian, very spirit filled, maybe they did IVF and then they conceived and lost that pregnancy, and then eventually conceive without IVF and have a child. Sometimes I've seen interviews where they then act like we went out of God's plan, we had IVF, so God punished us and took that child away, and this is now the child of promise and all of that. And he used to rub me off the wrong way. Now, I'm also maturing with myself, and I don't know what they're hearing or what God is saying to them, and I don't have the full picture. So I'm starting to be a bit more forgiving, a bit more open-minded. But I can tell you that you also know God for yourself. And the way God deals with all of us is different. For some people, God will just heal you because you ask. Some people will need treatment. After all, Christ asked some people to go and wash themselves, the lepers. He could have just said, leprosy be gone. Why do they need to wash themselves? So sometimes there's a process, and there's something you will learn in that process. Like if God had just giving me babies all the times, I would not have had all these IVF support that I'm using to support a lot of people who need it. I would not have had some of the experiences, and the trajectory of my life may have been different. So I also do not like the dress like your miracle sector of things. And please don't come for me. I will explain some of it. There are people whose faith can carry it, who are mentally tough and mentally strong, and they're surrounded by love. So even if they go and wear a baby bump on social media and they don't get pregnant, right? They have the cocoon of love to support them. There are people, when you have won that your baby bump and the next year you're not pregnant, you will be met with mockery because you have wicked people. Wicked people. And then there's all that pressure to make it happen because you have put it out there. Try not to make your faith about performance of others, because someone else is doing it, you don't know what is informing their faith. So I do not particularly like it. You can do it if you like it, but please have support. I don't, it leaves my mouth open a few times when I see it, and I know people who have, because of course, the people who the next year they have their miracle babies, it will be announced loudly. And all the people who did it, who are still unmarried after wearing wedding gown, or who don't have a child, it will just go silent. It will just go silent. So it's just sometimes so yes, set boundaries, smaller spaces, boundaries with people, quiet trust, and just build back your faith, because they can really, so find safe pastors, find community, not commentary. Just what you can do to it's a very lonely part, and we're trying to make it less lonely by being here for you guys. Every week I talk to people in the DM, and there are more and more people like me out there who are holding your hands, letting you know that there is no shege that has not been seen. And we are here, and we're joining you in prayer, and we're telling you that you will be all right. Right? So, and miracles can be in many ways. Miracles, yes, include conception and children, but peace before the answers. Marriage, even a marriage surviving infertility, is a miracle in itself. There are people who don't know that having sex can be a chore until you have to have timed intercourse because you're ovulating. Those who have been there know what I'm talking about. You've been on Clomid or Letrozole. You've set alarm. This is the window. Maybe there's football match. The man is watching it, or there's somewhere he wants to go. He said, no, it's time. Come. That is when you will understand that all sex is not sex. And then so please, have more pity and empathy for people who are going through. So marriage surviving infertility by in itself is a miracle. Faith that no longer feels like punishment. You get to that place. That's when you know you're healed. Your faith does not feel like punishment. Spiritual fruitfulness that births nations, not just babies. You will live in your purpose. You will do things, you will do exploits. I'm telling you, because I know that there are people who will try everything and still not end up with children. And there are people who have decided where to set, this is the last stop, this is where I stop, I am not doing anymore. There are people who have prayed and had peace. So there are different outcomes because churches are so focused on miracles that sometimes we don't take all these other nuances into account. There's, the journey, the waiting, the grief, the eventual testimony. There is no formula. For everyone, it will be different. There are different permutations of this. So this is why I am talking to my people in church, because you use the Bible. So we have examined the barren, the people who were called barren in the Bible. We have examined their stories. Nobody was cursed. Nobody had reproach. It was not juju from anywhere, just so that you know that there are different ways it can happen anyhow, and there is no formula. There's literally no formula. My God, I've kept everybody longer than I expected. So at this point, I'm going to conclude by praying for those waiting, those grieving, those hurt by church, those angry at God, and those who are afraid to hope again. I'm just going to say a brief prayer for them in my native language, and then we'll call it a night. N'aha Jesu, n'ike n'ọbara Jesu, onye nwe anyị na Chineke anyị na-ekene gị maka ime ka ndụ fọrọ anyị tata. Naanị gị bụ eze niile na-atụrụ isi n'ala. Ekwu eme, ama amasị amasị. Ọgbara nkịtị okwu biri n'ọnụ. Echeta obi esi ike. Ebe kue dike. Tata anyị na-ebunye ụmụ gị na ezinụlọ ha n'aha gị. Anyị na-arịọ gị ka ị gbaghara ha njọ ha, mere ha ebere, nye ha ogologo ndụ na ahụ isi ike. Okwu gị si na arịọ na anyị ga-arịọta, na anyị chọọ na anyị ga-achọta, na anyị kụọ aka n'ụzọ ga-emepe. Anyị nwere okwukwe na nchekwube n'okwu gị. Anyị na-arịọ gị nna maka ndị ụmụnne anyị na-achọ nwa, nne nke ụmụ ha nwụgoro anwụ. Anyị na-arịọkwa maka ndị dị ime na ha ga-amụ nwa ha n'udo na ọnwụ n'aha Jesu Kristi onye nwe anyị. Ka ihu anyị niile dịcha iche, ka mkpa anyị dị iche. Maka ndị obi ha gbawachara agbawa, zitere ha mmụọ nsọ gị, ka ọ kasie ha obi, ka ọ gbado ha ume, ka ọ nyere ha aka. Chukwu onye okike, nyere ụmụ gị aka, gbaghara ha njọ ha, nye ha nnọọ ka mkpa ha si dị. Ihe niile a ka anyị na-arịọ n'aha Jesu Kristi onye nwe anyị. Amen. Thank you for joining. Have a good evening. Bye.